I used to think the worst damage a parent could do came in the form of yelling or hitting. Turns out, control can be quiet, polite, wrapped in silver paper with a ribbon on top. My name is Franklin Dwyer. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to untangle myself from my father's shadow. A man who believed love was best expressed through credit lines, conditional offers, and tightly timed guilt trips. But last April, on my birthday, I made a mistake that nearly cost my family everything. It started with a box of chocolates. I was living in Milwaukee at the time, working part-time teaching painting classes at the local community center. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had distance from my father, a modest apartment that smelled like coffee and oil paint, and a quiet rhythm that kept me sane. That morning, I found a delivery at my door, a heavy silver-wrapped box with my father's neat handwriting on the card. "Happy birthday, Franklin. Enjoy these sweet things. Dad." For a moment I paused. My father hadn't sent me anything in years, not without some hidden agenda. But I'd always had a sweet tooth, and he knew that. Maybe it was an olive branch. Maybe he was softening with age. I set the box aside on the coffee table. A few hours later, my brother Eric showed up with his little boy Owen, 6 years old, full of stories and energy. Their babysitter had canceled last minute, and Eric needed a break. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, just dinner and a little cake. When Owen spotted the chocolate box, his eyes lit up like he'd found treasure. I laughed. "Go ahead," I said. "Take the whole box home with you." I didn't know, in that moment, that I had just handed them something far more dangerous than sugar, and that by morning I'd be standing in a hospital hallway, face to face with a truth I had spent decades avoiding. Growing up, my father wasn't a monster in the way people think of monsters. He didn't scream, he didn't hit, he didn't disappear. He showed up, always, with expectations. His name is Robert Dwyer. He was a respected cardiologist in our community, dressed in tailored suits, and always speaking like he was on a stage. People admired him. I feared him. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. Every compliment came with an invisible string. Every Christmas gift came with a lesson about earning things. Every time I brought home an A, it was expected. An A-, that was failure. My mother, Lorraine, tried to soften the edges. She used to slip notes in my lunchbox, whisper encouragement when she thought he wasn't listening. But she was tired, worn down. You could see it in the way her eyes stayed lowered whenever he entered the room. They divorced when I was 12. Quietly. No big scene. But when it came time for custody, Dad fought hard, and he won. He hired the best lawyers, dredged up every minor mistake Mom ever made, painted her as hysterical and unfit to the judge. The system saw his suit, his reputation, his bank account. They didn't see him, not because he wanted us, but because he didn't want her to have us. Eric was 9 then. He didn't understand what was happening, not really. He still looked up to our dad, still believed in him. I envied that innocence. After Mom left, we didn't hear from her for months. Dad said she had moved on, that she didn't care, that she was unstable. I believed him, because that's what children do. We believe the loudest voice in the room. Years later, I'd learned the truth, how he blocked her calls, intercepted letters, how he used his connections to paint her as unfit, unreliable, all so he could keep control of us. Control was his love language. When I said I wanted to study art, he laughed. "You think you'll make a living off doodles?" He insisted I apply to business school. I went. I lasted 2 semesters, dropped out, took night classes in art, got a job at a framing store and started over. It wasn't bravery, it was survival. He cut me off, of course, financially, emotionally. Ungrateful was the word he used. Embarrassment. Eric stayed close to him longer, married young, had Owen with a woman he adored, then lost her to ovarian cancer when Owen was just 3. That's when Dad stepped back in, with money, with support, with that same web I'd escaped years earlier. I watched as Eric slowly sank into it. He needed help, bills, childcare, time to grieve, and Dad was always there, just like he'd always been, with contracts, with consequences. That's when I started visiting more, bringing groceries, watching Owen, trying in my own quiet way to be a counterweight to the pull of our father. Eric used to say, "He's helping. I know it's complicated, but he's helping." But I knew better. I'd lived it. Our father never gave without expecting double in return. And still, somewhere in me, a part of that old child voice remained, the one that wanted to believe he could change, that maybe, just maybe, this year he'd send a birthday gift without strings. Maybe a box of chocolates meant nothing more than a box of chocolates. That's the lie I told myself, until it almost cost my nephew his life. That Saturday night was quiet. Owen had curled up on the couch with a bowl of spaghetti in his lap, nodding off before he even finished his cupcake. Eric looked more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. We laughed, played a short board game, and then I sent them home with leftovers and that box of chocolates. I remember thinking, this feels good, normal. The next morning I slept in. The sun was warm through the blinds. I made myself coffee and stepped out onto the small balcony overlooking the street. Birds chirped. A couple jogged by. Everything was still. Then my phone rang. Dad's name flashed across the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, it's always something, told me to pick up. "Morning," I said casually. "Franklin," he barked. "Where's the box?" I blinked. "What box?" "The chocolates. The ones I sent you." I paused. "I gave them to Eric and Owen last night." "Why?" The silence on the other end turned cold. "You what?" "They were just chocolates, Dad. Owen loved them. He ate a couple. Eric, too." There was a harsh intake of breath. Then, "You absolute fool," he exploded. "Those weren't for eating. They had my medication inside." I stood there dumbfounded. "What?" "Inside the chocolates," he hissed. "Heart medication. Prescription. I was trying to keep them hidden. Customs. IRS audit. It was just temporary. I was coming to get them next week. Mailing them discreetly felt safer than risking airport security." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You didn't think to mention this in the card?" I asked, voice shaking. "I didn't think you'd be so careless." I dropped my mug. It shattered across the balcony floor, but I barely noticed. "How dangerous is it?" There was a beat. Then, "It's adult dosage, blood pressure medication, powerful." I hung up, called Eric. No answer. I texted, "Call me. Urgent. Chocolates may be dangerous." 5 minutes later he replied, "Owen had 2. I had 1. He's fine." "Why?" I called again. This time he picked up, and I told him. The next hour was a blur. Eric rushed Owen to the hospital. I drove straight there. I barely remember the road. I arrived to find Eric pacing outside the ER, holding Owen close. His face was pale, panicked. "He threw up in the car," Eric said, "then got dizzy." We told the doctors everything. Well, almost. We said the chocolates had accidentally contained pills, thinking they were safe treats. The ER team sprang into action. Owen was taken for immediate observation. They flushed his system, checked vitals, monitored his blood pressure. Eric and I sat there, side by side, in silence. Then our father showed up. He marched through those hospital doors like he owned the place, demanding to know what was happening. When Eric confronted him, Dad brushed him off. "Is he stable? Then we're fine." Eric looked like he wanted to hit him. Instead, he said, "You need to leave. Now." But of course, Dad didn't. He leaned in, voice low. "You don't get it. If anyone finds out what those pills were, I could lose everything. My license, my practice, my reputation." I stood up. "Then maybe," I said, "you should have cared more about your grandson than your legacy." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "Dramatic?" Eric stood now too. "My son is hooked up to monitors because you decided to smuggle drugs in a dessert." Dad waved it off. "It was a precaution, a workaround, no harm done." Owen's blood pressure had dropped to dangerous levels. It wasn't nothing. I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time I saw it. Not a powerful man, not a provider, just a scared, selfish man clinging to control in whatever way he could. He wasn't trying to protect us. He was trying to protect himself. And it nearly cost us everything. The hours that followed were some of the longest of my life. Owen was stable, but his blood pressure was low, and the doctors wanted to keep him overnight for observation. Eric stayed with him. I waited in the hallway, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. Dad sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't look worried. He looked irritated, as if this whole thing was an inconvenience. "Franklin," he said after a long silence, "we can still fix this. You just need to keep your mouth shut. No one needs to know." I stared at him. "Keep my mouth shut? A 6-year-old is lying in a hospital bed because of your stupidity." "That's enough," he snapped. "Don't you dare speak to me like that. After everything I've done for you, for Eric." "You didn't do it for us," I said quietly. "You did it to own us." His face hardened. "Ungrateful, just like your mother." That's when I knew. There was no redemption arc coming, no apology, no growth, only more excuses, more guilt, more of the same. The doctor came out a few minutes later and pulled us aside. "Owen's doing better. He'll be fine," she said. "But we need to know what exactly he ingested, for the report, for safety." Eric looked at me. I looked at Dad. He gave me that look, his old signal. Shut it down. Play along. But something broke in me. "They were chocolates," I said slowly, "with hidden pills, prescription heart medication. He didn't know. None of us knew." Eric added, "He was trying to hide the pills, to avoid customs or some legal problem, sent them to Franklin by mail." The doctor was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for telling the truth." Her expression turned grave, and she immediately motioned to a nurse, speaking in low, urgent tones. Dad didn't say a word, but I could feel the heat coming off him. Later, after Owen had fallen asleep, Eric and I sat outside the room. The hallway smelled like hand sanitizer and tired nurses. We didn't talk for a long while. Finally, Eric said, "He's never going to change, is he?" "No," I answered. "He doesn't think he needs to." A pause. "He said he intercepted Mom's letters, that she did try. All those years we thought she gave up." Eric's jaw clenched. "He lied to us." I nodded. "Over and over. And we let him." That truth hurt more than anything, because for so long We'd shaped our lives around a man who didn't see us as people, just as parts of his image, props in the story he wanted to tell the world. I had spent years trying to earn his affection. Eric had traded his autonomy for financial help. And now, Owen had almost paid the price. I stood up. "I'm done," I said. Eric looked at me. Me too. We didn't know exactly what done meant in that moment, but we knew we couldn't keep living in his orbit. He was a man who mistook control for love, and we were finally ready to break free of both. The next morning we filed for a protective order. The judge didn't need much convincing. The medical records alone were enough. Temporary order granted. That same day, we packed up Eric and Owen's things and moved them into my apartment in Milwaukee. Cramped, but safe. Dad called, left voicemails, emails, begged, threatened, switched between shame and sympathy like it was second nature. We didn't respond, but I could feel the storm building. He wasn't used to being ignored, and we were about to find out just how far he'd go to reclaim his power. The first few weeks after Owen's hospitalization felt like limbo. We were safe, but unsettled. Eric slept on my couch. Owen took the bedroom. I turned the walk-in closet into a makeshift studio and painted late into the night, trying to work through the chaos in my head. Dad escalated, as expected. When the silence didn't work, he tried gifts. A brand new tablet for Owen, a leather briefcase for Eric, an envelope of cash with my name scribbled on the front. We returned them all. Then came the guilt trips, voicemails dripping with sentiment, emails titled, "Family Should Stick Together," and "This Isn't How We Fix Things." But we were done fixing things for him. The final straw came when Eric walked into our apartment one night and found Dad sitting on the living room couch. He'd convinced the landlord to let him in, claiming it was a surprise repair visit. Owen, thankfully, wasn't home. But Eric's face went pale. He didn't shout, just stood there, frozen, then quietly told Dad to get out. After that, we filed for a permanent restraining order. This time we hired a lawyer. A week later, I got a call from my supervisor at the community center. She'd heard about the emergency and was checking in. I told her just enough to be honest, but not enough to feel exposed. She listened, then said something I didn't expect. "We're opening a new arts program in Colorado, a fresh branch, senior instructor position, comes with relocation help. You interested?" At first I hesitated, but then I looked around, at the cramped space, at the fear in Eric's eyes, at Owen sleeping on a pile of folded blankets, and I knew. It was time. I said yes. That night I told Eric, "I've got a chance to start over, and I want you both to come." He didn't say anything right away. Then, finally, yeah, let's do it." He was just there, waiting, when Eric walked in. In less than a month, we sold what we could, packed the rest, and drove west. A clean slate, a small rental house near the mountains, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a school down the road for Owen. Eric found kitchen work quickly. He's always been brilliant in a restaurant. I took the teaching job and opened a tiny art studio on weekends. It was quiet, slow, but for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. One morning, I got a message, a number I didn't recognize, short, careful. "Franklin, is it true? Are you finally free of him?" "Mom," I called immediately. Her voice shook when she answered. So did mine. We talked for over an hour. She told me everything, how she'd tried for years to reach us, how every letter was returned, every call ignored, threats, court motions, lies. "He told me you hated me," she said. "I thought you left. I never stopped looking for you. We cried, laughed even. She lived in Arizona now, remarried, ran a small design business. Her new husband loved woodworking and grilled vegetables. She sounded happy, free, just like I was learning to be. By the time we hung up, something had shifted. I had been waiting decades for closure. Turns out, all I needed was the truth, and the courage to accept it. That night, I told Eric. He didn't say much, just nodded. Then he hugged me. And in that quiet moment, I knew something had changed in both of us. Not just distance from our father, but a return to ourselves, to the people we might have been all along, had we been allowed to grow outside his shadow. 6 months later, life didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like living. Our rental home in Colorado sat on a quiet street with a view of the mountains. The air was clean. The nights were quiet. We painted Owen's room blue, his favorite. He picked out glow-in-the-dark stars, and we stuck them on the ceiling together, forming constellations he could point to every night. Eric landed a full-time job at a local farm-to-table bistro. He came home smelling like rosemary and roasted garlic. He looked tired, but content. I spent mornings teaching art at the community center and afternoons in my studio, surrounded by half-finished canvases and music from the 70s, playing low in the background. Owen was thriving, happier, lighter. He still had moments, woke up crying once or twice from nightmares about hospitals. But with time and the help of a gentle child therapist, those nights became rare. Dad, meanwhile, had gone silent. After failing to appear at the restraining order hearing, the court made it permanent. He still tried. Emails, a few letters, guilt wrapped in apology, cards with "I miss you" scrawled across the bottom. We read them, then tossed them out. For the first time in our lives, we didn't owe him a response. We didn't owe him anything. One October afternoon, as the trees turned gold and red, I found a letter from him on my doorstep. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single line. "When you're ready to forgive me, I'll be waiting." I folded it carefully, set it on the fireplace, and never picked it up again. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't always mean return. Sometimes it just meant release. Mom came to visit over Thanksgiving. She brought photos from our childhood that I barely remembered, letters she'd written but never got to send. She cried when she hugged Eric. Owen clung to her like he'd known her all his life. That weekend, for the first time in decades, our family felt whole, not perfect, but real. One night after dinner, we sat around the table playing cards. Owen giggled at something silly Eric said. Mom was laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes. I looked around that room, and it hit me. This was the life I'd always wanted. No manipulation, no tension humming beneath the surface. Just presence, just peace. That's when I knew. Home isn't where you live. It's who you choose to be with. And healing doesn't always come in one big breakthrough. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, in routines, in quiet mornings and safe good nights, in the choice to keep going, even when the past tries to pull you back. That night, I stood outside under the Colorado sky, looking up at those same constellations Owen loved. I thought about all the years I spent trying to earn my father's love, jumping through hoops, shrinking myself, hoping he'd one day see me. He never did. But I see me now, and that's enough. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for listening to my story, but for holding space for stories like this. Stories about healing after betrayal, stories about quiet strength and finding peace after years of pain. Maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe you're in it right now. If so, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are not obligated to carry the weight others have handed you. It's okay to let go of the past, even if it shaped you. It's okay to walk away from family when the cost is your peace. And it's more than okay to start over on your own terms. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, share your truth, or just say, I hear you. And if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe, not because it helps the algorithm, but because it tells someone else they're not alone. This is your story too. We're healing one voice at a time.